markets have rallied since Donald Trump was elected president for a second term, and Bitcoin has hit record highs, and the dollar is surging. Some experts expecting the Trump administration could usher in an economic boom. But what does a Trump 2.0 economy mean for you? Here to help us break that down, Ted Jenkin, president of Exit Stage Left Advisors, and our financial advisor here on Morning Rush. Ted, good morning to you. Lots to talk about post-election here. Let's talk about what the president-elect ran on. Steep tariffs, tax cuts, regulation for businesses. That's why we're seeing what's happening on the stock market, a lot of optimism there, and mass deportation. But all of these could have some major economic impacts. Set the stage for us.
Yeah, I think, well, he ran on this sort of tax policy, Jay, right? Everybody said no taxes on overtime, no taxes on tips, no taxes on Social Security. The question is, will that get passed? I think the big thing next year is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires, and what will happen to all those tax cuts? Now, if corporate rates go down to a 15% tax rate, this is why I think the S&P 500 got excited here, why it rallied over the next week, because they're saying, yeah, I think corporate tax rates are going to go down. But on the other hand, there's a lot of gloom and doom about inflation. If there's a 60% tariffs on imported goods from China, if there's 10% tariffs around the country, what is that going to do to inflation? And now with Vivek and Elon, you know, Jay, in the White House, if they gut the government, what will that do to unemployment? So I think those are some of the concerns that you might see.
Speaking of Vivek and Elon, Elon is big behind Dogecoin, that new, it's the actual acronym for the department that this new department that they're leading.
The Doge.
The Doge. Doggy coin, Dogecoin, whatever it's called. It is seeing a surge following Trump's announcement here of the Department of Government Efficiency. What could the long-term impacts here be, and what's the value of Dogecoin going to look like? Well,
you know, Trump has basically said that Bitcoin has to be mined, minted, and made right here in the United States. And right now, the government has about $15 billion in cryptocurrency here in Bitcoin in reserves. So, you know, Elon Musk was always a big Bitcoin fan. Donald Trump had ran on this idea of having crypto. But I think the long-term view around the world, Jay, is that, you know, every country's in debt. It's not just the United States that's $36 trillion in debt. All the countries in Europe are in debt. China may say whatever they're going to say, but they're in debt as well. So there's still this idea that if paper is worth nothing, what's worth something? Now, some people would say gold, but other people will say, well, is Bitcoin sort of this universal way to say that one Bitcoin in China is the same Bitcoin in the United States, is the same Bitcoin in the UK? Time will tell if that works out, but obviously Trump ran on a pro-crypto platform.
Trump has also butted heads with the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell. He is in the news recently because the Fed has cut interest rates again. However, I have read an economist that warns that just because they're cutting interest rates doesn't mean that mortgage rates will necessarily come down in the immediate future. And you agree with that assessment. Why is that?
Well, first of all, I think people need to get rid of this idea of the 3% mortgages that they saw during the pandemic. Everybody at home, that happened because of the pandemic. But if there's not a great demand for government bonds, then mortgage rates tend to stay higher. And that's what's happening right now. There just isn't a great demand for U.S. government bonds.
Why?
Well, just because right now people can put money in the market. They can put money in real estate. There's just lots of other options that don't seem to have tons of risk to people where they can still make a lot of reward. Remember, people buy government bonds because it's guaranteed. I make a lower rate of return, but I know I'm going to get my money back. But if I think that there's a risk premium, meaning I put money in the S&P 500 and there's not that much risk relative to having those government bonds, I'm not going to own them. So I see in the next year that mortgage rates probably will hover in that 6% range, maybe as high as 7%. Could they get under 6, Jay? It's possible. Look, the Fed still has a mandate to keep inflation low and to keep maximum employment, right? So if unemployment skyrockets here or inflation skyrockets, then yes, I think you could see mortgage rates come down. Otherwise, 6%.
If inflation skyrockets, let's get out your crystal ball for a second and look 1 year down the road, maybe 2 years down the road. Trump has hit the ground hard running. He got tax cuts through. He imposed stiffer tariffs. What does that look from an economic perspective, from a cost of living perspective?
Yeah, well, I think in a first Trump term, remember, inflation was low. It was at that 2% or sub 2%. So that is one outcome. I think tariffs are a tool. They're not a policy. So if you use it as a bargaining tool, I don't think it'll greatly impact inflation. But if it becomes policy, then we could see inflation spike back up to that 4 or 5%.
Interesting stuff. It's definitely a new world here economically. Ted Jenkin, president of Exit Stage Left Advisors. Thanks for coming on the show, my friend. We'll be right back.